On behalf of everybody here at the show, The Big Bid Theory, hope everybody has had a safe, fun start to the 21-22 school year, whether it be K through 12, college, university, across the landscape. Of course, everybody is back to book learning. Bill Colhane, along with Rick Jennings here at our Austin studios, bringing you the latest episode of the show. We have a lot coming up in this episode. Of course, in the not too distant future, Rick Jennings, our very own Rick, is going to have your crazy bids that you can win. Cybersecurity has been a topic that we have discussed here on this show so many times as you go back through the history of TBBT. Have had a number of experts in various aspects of cybersecurity, security, business who have come on to discuss it and to discuss that topic. And we do it again here in this episode. More on Roger Grimes from KnowBe4 in a moment. But first of all, I want to think back to our recent special episode of the show. Emily Feenstra from ASCE, of course, stopped by to talk about the infrastructure bill. Great response from everybody. We do appreciate the emails, the text messages, the calls about that particular episode. Of course, we'll keep our eyes and ears on what's going on with the House of Representatives as far as passing some form of the infrastructure bill, American Jobs Plan. But anyway, look across the way here. Rick's giving me a little handshake, and Rick, great to have you back, of course.
I don't know exactly what it was. My brain just said, hey, form the handshake symbol, and that must be a way of saying good morning or something. I don't know. I think the Austin heat is kind of getting to me today, Bill.
We generally try to stay away from giving weather reports because this is a podcast, never exactly sure when people will be kind enough to tune in. But Rick, looking at you and here in Austin today, of course, high 90s. How are you holding up with the dog days of summer coming to an end?
Well, they are coming to an end. You're right. I mean, we in Texas, we have our methods of beating the heat down to a T. Whether that's jumping in the pool for a quick refresher, nice cold drink of water, and setting our AC probably a little bit lower than we should. I mean, we've got all that. We're pretty used to it. But honestly, at this point, I mean, the way that I would describe it is just saying I am ready to wear long sleeves again.
Very good. Well, Rick, stay hydrated. As again, it's hard to believe, but summer is in fact getting ready to turn the page, and it will be fall before we know it. So cybersecurity, again, something, thinking back, infrastructure I mentioned with Emily Feenstra. I guess if you had to list the number of episodes we've had and topics, kind of by how many episodes we've discussed a particular item, infrastructure, I guess, would be number one. But cybersecurity, information technology would certainly be high on that list as well. Likely number two if I sat down and put pen to paper. One thing we do know, and our show, of course, is powered by BidPrime, but you think back over the years, and as we've analyzed some of the data, public sector entities across the U.S., and it isn't just the United States, but of course, looking at the U.S. and Canada in particular, the number of solicitations we've seen from state, local, federal agencies, if you look at BidPrime's data, it has grown dramatically. Unbelievable rise in the number of bids, RFPs, requests, contracts that have come through. Government entities outsource for so many things, buy so many items, services, solutions, what have you. But cybersecurity, if you want to kind of get a peek for yourself, not sure if exactly everybody listening to the show, not exactly sure what your business does, what your business provides, but go to bidprime.com and kind of take a look, input your keywords and see what kind of opportunities are out there. I think you're going to be really maybe surprised. Some of you might not be surprised. You have a feel, an understanding of what's going on right now as so many businesses, organizations, yes, government agencies are trying to tackle the problem. Well, Rick, as we really get up and running, give everybody a little bit of a tease of the crazy bids you can win. I know Forrest Gump fans in particular, they might find this especially interesting.
Yeah, this one kind of fell into my lap, but that's probably about the best way to put it. If you are a fan of the Forrest Gump film, you are going to be a fan of this episode's crazy bid that is based up in Maryland. So stay tuned.
I think I speak for our entire audience. Can't wait to hear that crazy bid, as always. Roger Grimes is a data-driven defense evangelist at KnowBe4. He's a 30-year computer security professional, and some of you, the Roger's name might ring a bell. He's authored 12 books. Possibly you've come across one of his 1,000 articles published in national magazines. For Roger's full bio, I'm pointing here. You can't see my hand, can you? I'm pointing here. Go to the description of the podcast, and you can find out more about Roger Grimes. Turn the page here. Roger Grimes on the other side of this will come by to share his insights, his expertise. But as always, first here's a message from Bid Prime.
The Big Bid Theory is brought to you in part by Bid Prime. Over 11 years in changing the bid services industry, Bid Prime has become the solution for businesses serious about winning public sector business. From the premier technology in the industry to real-time bid notifications, supporting documents, and robust data tools, it's all backed by unmatched personalized customer support. Bid Prime. Start your free zero-obligation trial today. bidprime.com.
Roger Grimes from KnowBe4, yes, is with us here on the TBBT hotline. Welcome to the show, Roger.
I'm glad to be here.
As I pointed out in the entree to our conversation and giving your background, and for folks who have been listening to our show for a long time, they know that in each of the prior 6 seasons of the show, we have had at minimum one guest on to talk about cybersecurity. And so I go back to May. You wrote in a blog, your organization needs to take security awareness training more seriously. And again, our day one listeners have heard about cybersecurity on this show for a long time. Everyone in our audience, I can kind of look out and everybody's kind of shaking their head in agreement. You went on to write, survey after survey repeatedly shows that social engineering and phishing is the top threat to most organizations. Okay, Roger, if people, businesses, agencies, we have government folks listening, if they understand to some degree that we need to protect our IT assets against the bad actors, what is this thing, social engineering, and how do we do a better job of getting the points across to people?
Okay, yeah. So social engineering is basically, a digital scam, someone trying to con you into doing something. They're pretending to be a well-known brand, or could be trying to pretend to be a boss or an associate, somebody that has some sway with you, either personally or psychologically, to get you to do something that is against your own best interest or your organization's own best interest. Like, open this document, and you open the document and it spreads ransomware or something like that. So social engineering has been around forever, since the beginning of computers. It has, since the dawn of computers, been the number one way that most devices and organizations are compromised, followed by unpatched software. The surveys, we looked at, you can look at any survey, but you'll have a hard time finding in the history of computers any survey that looks at the root causes of cyber crimes to find one that doesn't say that social engineering is the biggest problem. You'll occasionally find them, but they're really rare. They're like a unicorn. But, like we randomly, a year or two ago, we randomly just pulled 100 reports on cybersecurity root causes, and all 100 said, social engineering is the number one problem. I pulled the only 6 reports in existence on ransomware. There's like 100 of them, but only 6 that actually tell you, well, here's the root causes by percentages, and they all agreed that social engineering was the number one problem. Sometimes they disagree on what the new number 2 problem is. Some of them say that it's password guessing. Some say unpatched software. Some of them say that it's the attackers buy the password. But number 1, social engineering is always, and it's always been that case. But so most surveys at least say that social engineering is responsible for 50% of cyber crimes, at least 50%. Many of them say 70, 80, 90. I think 92% is the highest. But let's say at least half, if not most of it. If you throw in unpatched software, that probably accounts for 90 to 99% of the risk of how people get broken into. And yet most organizations don't spend 5% on their IT security budget on those two things. So it's that fundamental misalignment of resources against the threats that make hackers and malware so popular. It would be like you're living in your house and criminals are breaking in every day through the window. They break in your house, the window, weeks go by, they break in again through a window, another window, weeks go by, another window. Occasionally a thief in the neighborhood somewhere breaks in using someone's door. But let's say in 70 to 90% of the cases, the thief is breaking in through windows in your neighborhood. And not only do you respond by going, oh, I guess I need better doors. I need to get more locks on my door. Maybe I need to switch from a wooden door to a metal door. Not only are you doing that, but everybody in your neighborhood saying that. And not only is everybody in your neighborhood saying that, but the police law enforcement that is trying to tell you how to protect yourself is saying you need to have better doors, despite every single person in this scenario understanding that thieves are more often than not coming through the windows. That's the problem.
So there's social engineering. If I heard you correctly, here we are in 2021. Are you suggesting that unpatched software here in 2021, would you say unpatched software would come in at number 2 as far as being the hierarchy? Wow.
Yeah. I mean, and let me say, one year in 2015, Cisco released a report saying that unpatched Java, it was Sun Java, then Oracle Java, but in 2015, at the time, Cisco said that unpatched Oracle Java was responsible for 91% of all successful web exploits by itself. One software program. And then people, in Microsoft, I'd worked for Microsoft for a long time. We've been warning for 9 years that unpatched Java was the number one way people were compromised through software. And eventually the browser manufacturers removed Java from the browsers, and it just, became less of a problem. But at that same time, social engineering, which had kind of been like a number one, number two problem, it had been displaced by Java for a little while. It became number one again and has been the number one threat by far, and only grew over the years. And that's because if I try to exploit unpatched software, which you can do, you have to write a different exploit for Windows than you do for Apple, than you do for Linux, than you do for Google Chrome, right? Because different software runs with different instructions on different operating system platforms. But if I social engineer you and ask you for your password or ask you to download this PDF, that works the same on every single platform.
Kevin Mitnick with KnowBe4 has said, and I grabbed this quote, "You could spend a fortune purchasing technology and services, and your network infrastructure could still remain vulnerable to old-fashioned manipulation." So we could have bags of money, I guess, but in summary, Roger, along with training, what should IT pros, IT directors, the network admins, the agency heads who are listening, what should they be spending their money on to help in the prevention of harm done by cybersecurity criminals, the bad actors out there?
Yeah, let me say, I'll update Kevin's quote. He made it sound like it's a possibility that it could be wasted money. I'm telling you, it's wasted money. that most of the time, if you focus just on defeating social engineering, it's actually usually far cheaper to focus on preventing that than all the other expensive things you're going to do that don't work. And the number one thing anybody can do is to better focus on mitigating social engineering and better patching their software. There's no doubt that beats everything else. Maybe start to use multi-factor authentication. That's where you get a device or software that requires two factors, like a PIN, plus you have to have a device or use your phone. That'll help prevent password attacks, which are probably the number 3 type of attack out there. Although again, social engineering plays in with the passwords, because how to get your passwords, social engineering. But, you should try to concentrate more on mitigating social engineering and unpatched software. You should do that with the best practice layered defense in-depth combination of the best policies you can think of, the best technical defenses to do it, and training. And the part that is normally missing is the training part. Everybody else has a fairly good handle on the policies and the technical defenses, but those policies and technical defenses for sure will fail every month, usually multiple times. And so when this social engineering gets to the end user, you want to train them on how to recognize a social engineering attack wherever it comes, whether it's through a phone call or an SMS message or an email or a website. You train them to recognize social engineering, and then you teach them how to what to do with it, which is typically ignore it, delete it, report it to IT security. There is nothing that you can do better than to mitigate social engineering. And most people are going to end up spending far less money if they concentrate on mitigating social engineering and better patching the software. I mean, like when I tell you you have to focus on social engineering or you have to better patch your software, there's nobody going, my God, that's a shocker. That's a shocker. I can't believe it. And they even usually have patch management software, or they, on their systems, it's saying, hey, make sure you patch. They're just not understanding how important it is. So really, a lot of times, it's not necessarily more money. It's usually less money, in fact. It's literally just refocusing on what's important to focus on. And it isn't a million other things. It's two things. And if you do two things a whole lot better, you're going to far better reduce cyber criminal risk than if you did anything else. And if you don't focus correctly on mitigating social engineering and unpatched software, the rest of it doesn't matter.
If anybody listening to this episode, go back and listen to what Diana Burley had to say about ransomware and about cybersecurity. Diana was director at I3P at George Washington, also Gary Brantley, the former CIO for Atlanta, the city of Atlanta. Gary wasn't the CIO when Atlanta had their ransomware issue a handful of years ago. But just go back, along with this episode, of course, but go back and listen to what Diana and Gary had to say. So is this a battle that can be won, Roger, in your opinion? I guess it'll never be perfect.
Yeah, I mean, eventually you're not going to defeat all cybercrime and malware and hackers, but you're going to hopefully get it to an acceptable level, just like today's crime is, right? Most crime is at a kind of a noise level. Most of the time our houses aren't being broken into. Most of the time we're not being robbed in our cars, but the internet's far different, right? It's like people's credit cards are being stolen all the time and malware is trying to hit you all the time. And really, let me say this, that not only do we concentrate on the wrong things, but literally every single computer security guide that we rely upon tells us to focus on the wrong thing. So if you look at, let's say, PCI DSS, that's a guide for people that handle credit card data that you have to follow. A lot of people like what's called the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. Hospitals have to follow HIPAA. Energy and nuclear plants do FERC and NERC, and there's Sarbanes-Oxley, and there's all these regulations that everybody has to comply with, compliance. Well, they have hundreds of controls, each of them. And what they don't tell you is that just following 2 or 3 or 4 controls to fight social engineering and to better patch your software, if you did that better, means everything else in the 100 other controls. And again, like I just recently did, I examined the PCI DSS, which is a decent document. That's again for companies that process, MasterCard and Visa data and stuff. It's like, 50, 80 pages long. It has 12 major controls, and that you're supposed to follow, each of them with subcontrols. Altogether, it's hundreds of subcontrols. Well, the first major control they tell you to focus on is firewalls. It's eight pages of firewall controls, 35 controls. And a firewall pretty much doesn't protect you today and hasn't for 2 decades. The years where firewalls actually provided you a lot of protection was 2 decades ago. And these days, they provide almost no protection. You got to have them, but they really don't work. Matter of fact, even President Biden in his recent executive order said we need to focus on what's called zero trust. Zero trust is a defense architecture that says firewalls don't work. So the President of the United States and CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, and everybody talks, zero trust, zero trust. That means firewalls don't work. But it's 35 controls, 8 pages in the PCI DSS document, and it's number 1. You know what's 12 out of 12? Social awareness, security awareness training. Fighting and mitigating social engineering is the 12th thing. It's 3 controls, about a paragraph big. So and let me say, that's every single computer security controls document you can think of. Or like the FBI last week came out with a warning that, hey, be worried about Hive ransomware. Hive ransomware, it's a big deal. Be careful, be careful. And in their first paragraph, they go, one of the most popular ways that Hive ransomware breaks in is social engineering. And then they listed the 8 things you could do to prevent Hive ransomware. None of them mentioned fighting social engineering. It is literally like this huge disconnect. And I went to another conference. I went to a cybersecurity insurance webinar. I gave my social engineering talk, and people were like, "Oh my God, you're right, everybody." And the insurance guy that followed me said, "Roger's so right. Social engineering is the biggest problem." He then started talking about ransomware and said, "Oh, if you want to fight ransomware, 99% of ransomware can be defeated by MFA." And that is not true. And then he listed the 8 things you should do, none of which said fight social engineering. So it is this huge disconnect. And I've been talking about this for a lot of years. I've written books on it. I've written white papers on it. I've written tons and tons of articles. I'm spending the rest of my life with one message. And this is a very simple message. Concentrate more on the ways that you're most likely to be broken into, and those ways are social engineering and unpatched software above all else.
The bad guys, the bad actors, I keep saying, they prefer easy and vulnerable, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're laughing hysterically. The Hive ransomware guys got to be laughing at the FBI document. First, they had to be scared. Oh my God, the FBI is focusing on us. And then when they saw the mitigation, they went, "Hey, still time to party."
For our listeners to this episode, Roger, who possibly don't know about KnowBe4, and incidentally, there's a link to KnowBe4 in the description of this episode. But anyway, for folks who are maybe not familiar, can you tell us a little bit about KnowBe4? Who's involved, what you folks do, solutions, services provided?
Sure. We're the largest offering of security awareness training. So we have like over 1,000 pieces of content. We're a service. And when you sign up with us and you import your user list, you can automatically create what we call campaigns, but you can send education. We believe that you should give education to your end users about the different threats, many of them being social engineering, that they get. And then at least once a month, you do a simulated phishing test that sees how well the people understood the lessons you were teaching, and are they what's called phish prone or phishable. Remember, if the number one threat is social engineering, testing, training them against it, and then testing to see if they are phishable is the number one thing that you can do. And what's great is the companies that follow our service, and it pretty much sets up and it automates, within a couple of hours, you're up and running, and you leave it alone and it does. And it's even cool if someone fails a phishing test, they get more training. If they fail another phishing test, they get another type of training and all kinds of cool stuff in it. But we know for sure the companies that use our services, if you do follow what we say, which again is monthly training and monthly simulated phishing testing, don't let the hackers be the only person testing your employees, that you will reduce your risk of, before people use our service, the average company has about 1/3 of their workforce will click on a phishing email. By the time they get through with our training and stuff, less than 5%. And it's a significant risk reduction.
In preparation for this segment, for our conversation, just to our audience listening out there, I obviously went to KnowBe4's website, and there is so much useful, good, timely information. So again, there's a link to KnowBe4. If you glance down at the description of this episode, you'll be able to see it there. And on that note, there's a good segue, Roger. Are there any particular publications, references, or anything you have coming up in the not too distant future you'd like to share with folks listening?
Yeah, I would say, because my most important issue is just making sure that you do a data-driven defense, focusing on the right things. You can put in Google or Bing data-driven defense crimes, and you'll see a ton of free stuff out there. I mean, I've written a book on it, but there's a ton of free stuff. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm Roger A. Grimes in LinkedIn. If you're there, I'm getting ready to do an updated class, what they call a master class on my data-driven defense, and I'll be putting a lot of the same concepts, but also giving lots more examples and things like that. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, I post 2 to 3 original articles that I write every week, plus a lot of other content. But you'll also see I offer a lot of content about malicious browser attacks, about social engineering stuff, about multi-factor authentication, what's good and what's good about it. So follow me on LinkedIn, and you'll get a ton of free stuff.
Roger, on behalf of everybody here in the studio, our audience, thanks again for carving some time out and sharing your insights with us.
I'm glad to be here, and then thanks everybody for listening.
So there you have it again. Roger Grimes, kind enough to come by. Roger from KnowBe4. I just said it. I understand. I just mentioned it during our conversation, but please do go to the description of the podcast, this episode, and you can see a link to Know Before and also some background information on Roger. And incidentally, thank you to Amanda Tarantino from Know Before. Whenever we invite a guest on, I shouldn't say every time, but most times there is somebody else involved in helping the show, our research team, and whoever we're reaching out to. Usually somebody involved in helping to get things scheduled. So again, thanks to Amanda. And now, looking at the clock, kind of up against it here, Rick, what do you have in the latest version, the latest installment of Crazy Bids You Can Win? Take it away.
Awesome. Okay, so as I said, this one is based up in our New England friends, the territory of Maryland, and today's crazy bid is put out by the Maryland Department of Health and Human Services. The title of this bid is Third-Party Retail Shrimp Sampling Collection and Chemical Analysis. So this one just kind of fell into my lap, was an odd one that popped out. Of course, the U.S. government is the largest purchaser of goods and services, as we know, in all the world. And so, of course, something like this is bound to come up sooner rather than later. So if you're a company that it basically just does inspections, chemical tests and analysis of incoming foods, this one is probably a really good one to hop on. And I did a little bit of research myself. It looks like this bid came up through the 2021 congressional appropriation with funds that were sent out through that. And this is just kind of a way to help regulate the export of shrimp import of shrimp here into the States that we get largely from Southeast Asia. And I didn't know too much about this, and I looked up a little bit of the process that goes behind it for shrimp farming, and there's lots of neat metrics actually behind it. Apparently, shrimp farming brings in tons and tons of income to small shrimp farmers, particularly in the hub of Southeast Asia, through China and India and some of those countries. And apparently shrimp is the most valuable traded marine product in the world today. And the average annual per capita consumption of shrimp here in the U.S. is now at 4 pounds per person. Now, I'm not a big shrimp or seafood person, but I imagine a lot of you are just kind of making up for me in that, because shrimp is everywhere and apparently it's delicious. So, no, that was just really interesting to hear. So if you are based up in Maryland, or you can do business in Maryland with the Department of Health and Human Services, then take a look at this week's crazy bid that you can win.
Shrimp is one of my favorite foods. The crazy bids you can win. Now I'm sitting here in the studio kind of hungry. But that's going to do it for this episode of the show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Do want to thank again our special guest, Roger Grimes from Know Before. Thanks again to Amanda for helping us to cross the T's and dot the I's on the visit. And as Roger said, cybersecurity, when it comes to protecting your IT assets, protecting your business, your organization, your agency, maybe that to-do list isn't quite as long as you might have suspected, might have feared. And to you, our friends, as fall approaches, hope everybody is staying safe out there. Appreciate you tuning in, sharing, downloading, following the Big Bid Theory. Thanks for spreading the word as our audience continues to grow over the years. If you haven't already, our Twitter handle is @TheBigBidTheory. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's contract_hunter. And don't forget, we are on Facebook. We are on LinkedIn. Powered by Bid Prime. Hello, Rick. Rick waving. Thanks to Rick Jennings and our entire team here at the Big Bid Theory. This is Bill Culhane. Until next time, go Gunners, Barracudas, Tigers, Bobcats, and Cubs. And we wish you all the best in protecting your business and growing your business.
Powered by Bid Prime, we thank you for tuning in to the Big Bid Theory. From Austin, Texas, the show is produced by Bill Culhane and Jim Ward. Producer and engineer is Rick Jennings. You can find other episodes of the show on platforms such as iHeart, iTunes, Spreaker, Google Play, Stitcher, among others. As always, thank you for downloading and sharing the podcast.
We're having so much fun, oh much fun, oh much fun.